Section 7. Unit 6, the Finance Instruments. Introduction and Objectives. Lesson 1, Parts of a Promissory Note. Lesson 2, Parts of the Deed of Trust. Lesson 3, Parts of the Mortgage. Lesson 4, Wrapping up Instruments of Real Estate Finance. Security Instruments and Standard Provisions. Like any good contract, a security instrument needs to have the entire agreement spelled out in accurate detail. Here are some of the clauses and provisions that help to create that clear agreement, and that are standard for mortgages and deeds of trust. Power of sale. Standard in the deed of trust, but may also be included in a mortgage. This clause allows the trustee, or the mortgagee, in the case of a mortgage, to sell the property in order to recover losses from borrower default using a non-judicial foreclosure process. Defeasance clause or reconveyance clause. This clause states that the borrower will regain full title once the debt is fully repaid. Mortgages use the defeasance clause. The lender is required to execute a satisfaction of mortgage. Deeds of trust use a reconveyance clause. The trustee is required to execute a deed of reconveyance to give full title to the trustor. Late charge provisions. Charges for loan payments that are received after their due date are usually stipulated in the promissory note attached to the security instrument. Acceleration clause. If the borrower fails to make a payment or to abide by the terms of the agreement, for example, by not paying property taxes, this is the clause that describes this as a default, and which creates a consequence of making the entire debt immediately due and payable. Alienation clause. Also known as the due on sale clause, this allows the lender to make the entire loan due and payable immediately if the property is sold or otherwise transferred. The presence of this clause can affect the ability of a buyer to assume the loan. Security instruments and additional provisions. Depending on the transaction, clauses and provisions may be included in the security instrument or the promissory note to establish the details of the specific agreement. These are some of the provisions that can be used when needed. Here are some common clauses and provisions with a description of what they do. Lock-in clause. This is a form of prepayment penalty. The borrower isn't allowed to pay the loan in full prior to a specific date, allowing the lender to continue making money from the interest on the loan. Prepayment penalties of any sort have largely been outlawed and are not allowed on most government loans. The lock-in clause is something that is only likely to be included on very high-yield mortgages where the lender wants to ensure earnings for a specific time period. Subordination. A subordination clause allows the security instrument's lien position to be placed in a lower priority to a new loan using the same property as collateral. For example, a developer purchasing a vacant lot may need a construction loan as well as the loan for purchasing the land. The subordination clause in the mortgage makes it possible to obtain the construction loan. Without it, the developer is unlikely to find a lender willing to finance the development of the lot. Cross-default. This clause automatically puts a borrower in default on all loans if the borrower defaults on any loan where the clause is included. Prepayment clause. This provision allows the borrower to prepay the loan at any time without penalty. Exculpatory. This clause protects the borrower's other assets in case of foreclosure. In a judicial foreclosure, a lender can choose to ask for a deficiency judgment, which would allow the lender to include a request for money over and above the proceeds from the foreclosure sale. The exculpatory clause protects the borrower from that possibility. Partial release clause. This clause is usually seen in an instrument used for a new subdivision. It requires the lender to release a portion of the property from the lien when a part of the debt has been paid. This allows a developer to acquire title to one lot in the subdivision and to convey it to a buyer without having to pay off the entire loan. The clause is called the partial satisfaction clause when used in a mortgage, and a partial reconveyance clause when used in a deed of trust. Non-recourse clause. Because a note in mortgage or note in deed of trust are negotiable instruments, this clause can be included to protect the original mortgagee/beneficiary if the security instrument is sold and the borrower subsequently defaults. If the security instrument doesn't include this clause, the entity that sold the security is required to reimburse the security's buyer if the borrower defaults. With the non-recourse clause, the entity that buys the security is responsible for taking action to recover the remaining balance of the loan if the borrower defaults. In actual practice, the borrower interacts with a loan servicer to make payments, and that loan servicer will take action against the appropriate party if the borrower defaults. Non-disturbance clause: if a tenant is renting a property, and the property is sold or the lender seizes the property due to borrower default, this clause prevents the tenant from being evicted. In essence, it assures the tenant that his or her rental agreement will be honored. Instruments of real estate finance. Study sheet. 3 types of finance instrument in real estate. Note with mortgage. Note with deed of trust. Contract for deed. Mortgage and deed of trust. Instrument feature. Mortgage. Deed of trust. Number of parties. 2. Mortgager/borrower. Mortgagee/lender. 3. Trustor/borrower. Beneficiary/lender. Trustee. How title is held. Creates a lien against the property. The mortgager holds legal title. Trustee holds legal title on behalf of beneficiary. Maintenance of collateral. Homeowner required to pay property taxes and insurance and maintain the physical condition of the property. Homeowner required to pay property taxes and insurance and maintain the physical condition of the property. In case of default, judicial foreclosure is typical. Non-judicial foreclosure is typical due to power of sale clause. Release when loan is paid in full. Lender executes a satisfaction of mortgage. Trustee executes a deed of reconveyance. Contract for deed equals seller financing instrument. Purchase agreement, note, security instrument in one document. Seller/vendor holds legal title until borrower/vendee pays off loan. Terms are flexible. Junior finance instruments. Create junior lien unless first lien has subordination clause. Second mortgage, third mortgage, home equity loans. Clauses found in finance instruments. Power of sale, standard for deed of trust. Defeasance/reconveyance. Late charge. Acceleration. Alienation/due on sale. Prepayment. Lock-in. Subordination. Cross-default. Exculpatory. Non-recourse. Partial release. Borrowers in default may apply for a loan modification, which may do the following. Reduce payments. Reduce interest rate. Extend amortization. Reduce principal. A new buyer may take on existing loan via an assumption or as a purchase subject to existing financing. Promissory note. Borrowers promise to repay. Negotiable instrument. If attached to security instrument must be referenced. Includes amount of principal, interest rate, schedule of repayment, borrower's signature, date of signing. Borrower is maker. Lender is payee. Seller financing options. Full financing. Second mortgage, supplement conventional first. Wraparound mortgage. Buy-down points, permanent or temporary.